Sara, now that your father is gone and I've already received his $200 million inheritance, I don't need you anymore, you can leave. Her words hit me like ice water, breaking the silence in the room. My mother stared at me, not even trying to hide her dislike. It hurt, of course, but deep down, I expected it. I took a deep breath, forced a small smile, and said, "Fine, I'll go." Days passed, and the house felt emptier than ever. Then one day, the phone rang. It was her, the woman who said she didn't need me. "Sara, where's my inheritance?" Her voice was shaking with fear and anger. She had no idea that the man she always underestimated had planned everything perfectly. My father was always one step ahead. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Welcome to Revenge Scales, where justice always wins. My name is Sara, and I'm 27 years old. Until recently, I lived with my parents. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. My dad was my hero, a hardworking man who built his own business from nothing. Even with his busy schedule, he always made time for me, no matter how tired he was. He'd come home with a smile and ask, "What are we doing today, kiddo?" He was my rock. My mother was different. She looked perfect, always dressed up, always going to events, but she was never really there. She would promise to spend time with me, then cancel with, "I'm busy." She felt more like a guest in our home than a real mom. While my dad held our family together, she was just a pretty face with no real warmth. As I grew older, I admired my father even more. I dreamed of working with him, learning everything, and continuing his legacy. But what I didn't know was that he had already planned my future. When I was in college, I told my dad my dream. "Dad, I want to work in your company after I graduate. I'm preparing, and I want to follow in your footsteps," I said excitedly. He was about to smile with pride when my mother interrupted, as if she was cutting in on an important moment. "Sara, are you sure?" she asked, giving me a look like I had said something ridiculous. "I don't want to just marry someone rich," I insisted. She sighed dramatically, like an actress in a soap opera. A woman should find a good husband and let him take care of her. I realized then that arguing with her was pointless. She would never understand me. Instead of fighting, I focused on my studies and my dreams. After I graduated, I started working at my father's company. He taught me everything, every trick, every strategy, every detail. But what I didn't know was that he was running out of time. In just 6 months, he prepared me to take over before collapsing at work. The diagnosis was terrible, and the next 5 years were a battle. One day, my mother asked me, "Sara, how's the company doing without your father?" She tried to sound concerned, but I knew better. "It's tough," I said, "but Dad left me everything I need." The way she looked at me, part disbelief, part anger, told me I had made the right choice. "Well, just don't ruin the company like they say second generations always do," my mother said, her voice full of doubt, as if she was waiting for me to fail. I stayed quiet. During my father's illness, arguing with her had become normal. Even when he was weak, he still visited the company sometimes. It was clear he still saw it as his life's work, even though he knew he had to step back. "These employees and this company mean everything to me, Sara," he told me one day, his voice trembling, "but it's time for me to let go." His words felt heavy, pressing down on my heart. "I don't know if I can be like you, Dad," I admitted, my throat tight, "but I promise I'll do my best to honor what you built." That day changed everything for me. My father didn't just leave me a company, he left me a dream, one he had created from nothing. After that, my days were long and exhausting. I handled the business while still visiting him in the hospital. It was my way of staying strong. My mother, on the other hand, did the bare minimum, dropping off clean clothes and sighing dramatically, as if each visit was a huge burden. I often wondered, did she really feel nothing for him? No gratitude? No love? Watching my father grow weaker while knowing all he had sacrificed broke my heart. Meanwhile, she only cared about little, meaningless things. He had given us everything, and she barely seemed to notice. For a year, I followed the same routine, working, visiting him, barely sleeping, and constantly worrying, until one day, he passed away in his sleep. Between funeral plans, hospital bills, and endless paperwork, I didn't even have time to grieve. As always, my mother left everything to me. She stayed in her perfect little world, untouched by responsibility. The day after the funeral, when I finally thought I could breathe, she walked up to me. "Sara, now that it's all over, you must feel relieved," she said, as if grief was just another chore on a checklist. I sighed, not surprised. This was exactly who she was. "Leave this house," she continued. "I just inherited $200 million from your father, so I don't need you anymore." She spoke without a hint of emotion, as if she had rehearsed those words. It stung, not because I didn't expect it, but because no daughter should ever hear something like that from her own mother. There was no point arguing. Did she really think money could replace family? That it could erase everything she had neglected? With 1,000 questions in my mind, I decided to leave. The next morning, I packed my things, sold what I didn't need, and left. My mother was shocked at how fast I moved, but she had no idea I had been planning this for months. More importantly, she didn't know about my secret. Then, my phone rang. "Come back to the house right now," my mother shouted, her voice full of panic and anger. "I'm working, Mom." "What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I need to talk to you. Come quickly," she insisted. I sighed, grabbed the SD card, and returned to the house where I had grown up. I held it like a secret weapon but wasn't sure if I would even need to use it. As soon as I stepped inside, the accusations started flying. "You took all of your father's inheritance, didn't you? I knew it. That's why you left so fast. Hand it over now." Her greed was almost suffocating. I stared at her for a moment, debating whether to argue or let the video do the talking. "How can you be so selfish? You weren't even a real mother," I said simply, then handed her the SD card. Her anger turned into confusion. "What is this?" she asked, eyeing it like a strange puzzle. "You probably don't even know how to play it," I said, masking my disappointment with sarcasm. I pulled out my laptop, inserted the card, and played the video. The screen lit up, and there he was, my father, just as I remembered. My heart skipped a beat. I set the laptop on the table and walked out, leaving her alone to watch. As I paced down the hall, I wondered, would his words change anything? She had never questioned my father before, but maybe now, maybe this time? When I returned, she was crying, real, uncontrollable tears. I was shocked. I never thought I'd see her like this. A part of me wanted to know what my father had said, but something held me back. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I expected. She wiped her face with trembling hands. "Yes, I'll be fine. I understand your father now. I'll respect his wishes. From now on, I trust you to handle everything. Go home for today. Call me when you have time to talk." I nodded, realizing she needed space. As I walked away, her words echoed in my mind. How had my father managed to reach her, even after he was gone? Days passed, and she never called. Almost a month later, her silence started to worry me. During my lunch break, I decided to check on her. I knocked, but no one answered. The house was empty. That night, I returned and was relieved to see the lights on. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced. I came earlier, but you weren't home. I was worried," I told her. "Sorry, I was at my part-time job," she said casually. "A part-time job?" I repeated, stunned. I had always known my mother as someone who despised working. She acted like she was allergic to it. Seeing her change so suddenly left me speechless. "What happened?" I asked. "Was it the video? What did Dad say to you?" "You should watch it too, Sara. Take it home with you," my mom said, sliding the SD card toward me. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling a tight knot in my stomach as I picked it up. "Of course, go ahead," she nodded, her face unreadable. Back at my office, I hesitated before inserting the card into my computer. As the video began, my father's familiar face filled the screen. "My dear, if you're watching this, it means you couldn't reach Sara," he said in his calm, thoughtful voice. "First of all, thank you for helping me raise her. Without you, I couldn't have managed the business while taking care of her." His words hung in the air, but something in his tone made me uneasy. Then he said it. "You took care of Sara, even though she wasn't your daughter, and for that, I am forever grateful." Everything stopped. What did he mean? I'm not her daughter? Shock hit me like a lightning bolt. My father kept talking, unaware of the storm he had just unleashed in my mind. "You've stood by my side for years, sacrificing your own dreams. I allowed you to live in luxury, but now that I'm gone, I worry about what will happen to you." His words made sense in a way that hurt more than I expected. The emotional distance, the minimal but constant care, it all clicked. I shut the laptop, my head spinning. I barely slept that night, trying to process everything. By morning, I knew I had to confront her. "Mom, I watched Dad's video. I know the truth now," I said, my voice trembling. She met my gaze and, after a long silence, finally spoke. "I raised you because they asked me to. That's the only reason," she admitted, her voice heavy with years of buried truth. The room fell silent, but my mind raced. I needed more answers. "What happened to my real mother?" She took a deep breath before answering. "Your father and my sister had you together. She passed away shortly after giving birth. Your father was devastated, and I promised to take care of you. That's how I became your mother." A strange mix of relief and confusion washed over me. The missing pieces of my life finally fit together. Memories surfaced, flashes of her working in a cafe, the rare moments when she smiled genuinely, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about owning her own cafe someday. That was her dream, and she gave it up for me. Inspired by my father's words, she decided to chase that dream again. She got a part-time job, determined to build something for herself. One afternoon, during a quiet moment, she admitted, "I should have done this sooner. Work is fun, and to my surprise, I'm actually good at it. I never thought I'd feel this way." Then, her voice softened. "Sara, is it my fault I didn't work before? I'm so sorry, truly." Before I could respond, she continued, "No, it wasn't your fault. I made that decision for myself, but the truth is, I was never good with children. I did what I could, but I failed to be the mother you needed." Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, we were having an honest conversation, no barriers, no resentment. Something had changed between us. As we talked more in the following days, I realized we were finally beginning to understand each other, not just as mother and daughter, but as two women trying to connect after years of distance. It was during one of these conversations that we made a decision together, to use part of my father's inheritance to fund her dream cafe. Since she started working, my mom had changed. She was humbler, more reflective. When we discussed financing the cafe, she hesitated, a stark contrast to the woman who once kicked me out without a second thought. While balancing my own work, I helped her navigate the process of opening the cafe. We spent more time together, sharing tasks and quiet moments. Something unexpected happened, our relationship began to bloom. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time, I felt like we were truly mother and daughter, even if our story had started differently. When it came to daily expenses, she was firm. "I'll handle them myself," she insisted, refusing any help from my father's inheritance. "Promise me that if you ever have trouble, you'll tell me. After all, Dad trusted me to take care of you," I said, my concern evident. She smiled, a quiet strength behind her expression. "I'll be fine. Living alone doesn't cost that much." But when the conversation turned to the cafe, she faltered. She wanted to stand on her own, but she also knew she would need support. Taking a deep breath, she finally admitted, "I'll count on you." "Of course, I'm excited about this too, so do your best," I encouraged her. Her determination was clear, but so was the hope in her eyes. After all these years, we had finally become a real family. The revelation that she wasn't my biological mother could have driven us apart, but instead, it brought us closer. It was as if the truth had come at just the right time. "Your cafe opens tomorrow. Your dream is finally coming true," I said, watching her put the finishing touches in place. She looked at me, eyes shimmering with emotion. "Watching you work so hard on this business reminds me of my own youthful dreams. I think that's why I'm here. It's thanks to you and Dad." My words carried genuine gratitude. "Thank you, Mom." She took my hand firmly, her voice filled with newfound conviction. "I promise to always be your mother." At that moment, I felt something shift, a closeness between us that had never existed before. "From now on, we'll get along better than ever," I said with a small smile. "In the end, we only have each other." After my father passed, I finally accepted the reality of our relationship. I even considered moving back to my hometown so we could be together again. My mom, however, had one concern: my terrible eating habits. "You eat so poorly when you're alone. Looks like I'll have to take care of you again," she sighed, half complaining, half teasing. I couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes, I imagined my dad watching over us, surprised, and maybe even proud, of how far we'd come. His house, his business, and the inheritance he left behind were safe with me, but more importantly, his greatest wish had come true. We had become a family, in the truest sense of the word. Together, we visited my father's grave, and beside him, my biological mother's, my mom's older sister, standing there, I felt a deep sense of peace. It was as if we were telling them, everything is finally in place. After completing the adoption process, I was officially registered as my mother's daughter, but more than just a legal document, it was the confirmation of a bond that went beyond blood, one built on years of sacrifice, misunderstandings, and, ultimately, love. Today, we are a real family. And today, I understand the importance of seeking the truth before acting impulsively, before letting resentment cloud my judgment. This journey taught me that sometimes, the answers we search for come with lessons we never expected to learn. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means the world.